talking. I'm Alex Coffey alongside Kevin Hanks. Now time to welcome in Landon, the co-founder of LikeFolio.com, for a little discussion on the electric vehicle space. So Landon, let's start right there. We'll start, kind of wide here, just a broad kind of demand assessment that you see it, because we read all about electric vehicles. Seemingly Tesla's making news headlines every day. Obviously, there's legislation that's been passed that's supposed to be driving spending towards this type of infrastructure of alternative energy. But are consumers interested in these products?
They absolutely are. I mean, if you look at the chart of electric vehicle demand, it's shocking. I mean, if you would have looked at it a year ago, it was a huge, almost like a hockey stick curve. But when you zoom out, that move looks insignificant compared to what's happening now. Gas prices are absolutely driving this. It's incredible how much the up and to the right is on this. I mean, this is just like a beautiful chart for electric vehicle demand, and 200% year over year. So it's basically tripled over the last year. And it was, like I said, it was high a year ago, and we're triple what it was a year ago. So really strong on the industry as a whole. But each company has its own trials and tribulations, I guess. And RIVN right now is struggling a little bit. And we look at what happened with this recall. It's basically, they're recalling basically every vehicle they've ever delivered. The messaging is really poor. I mean, they're talking about bringing in every vehicle because you might lose control of your steering. At least that's what the kind of the translation of the word on the street is. Really, it's basically like a loose nut in the steering column, and it may affect maybe 1% of the cars, but the messaging wasn't great, and the overall sentiment behind that is just incredible. So this chart we're looking at is happiness of RIVN. And green is positive, red is negative, and purple, that's the key there. That is the ratio between the two. And you can see that right before this, they were in the mid-80s on percent happiness. So 85% of people who had an opinion on RIVN were positive. And that has dropped now under 70%. It's about 69. And that was just in a very short amount of time. You can see it's about a 16% drop on a quarter-over-quarter basis, that 7-day moving average. Just absolutely terrible PR for this company. It will go away over time, but for the short term, it's very, very negative for the company as perception.
Landon, this is not the first and only recall in the world of a car maker. They happen a lot. And and I spoke in the first segment, there's been no accidents, there's been no injuries. This is more of a precautionary recall by them of about, depending on who you listen to, it's about 13,000 and some change, somewhere between 13 and 14,000, but it's basically all of them. You're right. They're bringing back everything that they've put out is basically being recalled. So you're right. The messaging is not great, but this stock is in the infant stage still, Landon. 13,000 cars is a rounding error when you talk to these other car companies and what they're putting out. Now, they've remained they've kept their target for 25,000 by the end of the year. If you go to Bloomington Normal, Illinois, where I went to college, they're everywhere driving around that town. So that's where they're made, in the old Mitsubishi plant there. So the cars are getting out there. They're good-looking cars. Isn't this just an unavoidable toll booth on the highway for this company? Isn't this something that 2 weeks from now is going to be over with?
I think so. I think that they did what they had to do, right? I mean, it'd be different if a driver lost control of their car and caused a fatal accident because of this. They're getting ahead of it. They're doing the right thing. But when you can spin it in a very negative way, and the way that I've heard it talked about is pretty negative. They're recalling everything they've ever made because the steering column might fall off. Like, it's just, that's kind of the messaging that's out there. And I think that they maybe need to do a better job of the messaging, but they're doing the right thing. And I do think you're right. A month from now, it's going to be in the rearview mirror, to continue on your metaphors. But I don't think it's going to be a big problem for this company. Long term, they're getting ahead of it, and they're going to put it behind them.
Yeah, stock's still 50% off its lows made, let's say 2 quarters ago. So certainly firming up as the overall markets lost some momentum over the last few weeks. But Landon, I got more of a kind of a philosophical question. So you guys are analyzing, customer activity, demand, interests over there at LikeFolio, and I know at least Andy, but I'm guessing you as well are both pretty into like new technology and tech trends and stuff. But how could someone, unless money was not an object, go buy a car that is one of the first 10,000 of these from one of these companies? Because not even the fact of this recall, but what if Rivian just for some reason loses funding, runs out of momentum here, and just ceases to exist? Who's going to fix that car?
So it's either money's not an object or you're just a fanatic and you love this company, right? I mean, again, we're talking about not a lot of cars when you zoom out and compare to other car companies. So I think it's a pretty tough purchase for an average person who has limited funds and maybe hasn't been just reading everything about Rivian over the last couple of years. But you've got to be a fanatic, or you've got to just have so much money that it doesn't matter. I think really the company to look at is Tesla, and they're the ones that need to prove this. They've done it so far. They've proved the market. And I would guess that if it weren't for Tesla's success, people would be far less likely or more skeptical to buy into Rivian, because they see what Tesla's done. In their mind, it's basically like, Tesla 2, sort of the new Tesla or whatever. Again, I talked about this before. Rivian is basically Tesla from years ago, and they're taking a different approach with the truck. But still, if you're confident, you see a lot of people driving Teslas, and you say, well, I guess that's no problem with those, so Rivian can do it too. I think that's probably the logic. I don't think they're going to the level that you're thinking of. What if they lose funding? What if there's a problem? They should be, but they're not.
So final thoughts here then. You mentioned Tesla. Is Tesla still far and away the #1 EV player from a consumer interest standpoint? Because they seemingly are past the tipping point now where they have this infrastructure. They can churn some cars out. They can get them delivered. And then you have companies like Rivian, maybe Fisker, some of these others that are working on the infrastructure, Lucid. They have interest, and then the legacy players just can't seem to get any interest. So is there any other names beside Tesla, maybe on the legacy side, that be that Toyota, GM, Ford, that anyone likes the electric vehicles they're making?
I'd say Ford is the one that is getting some looks, especially with the F-150 Lightning. I think that they had a really strong ad campaign there. They definitely turned some heads, and I think that's the opposite problem. They don't have the problem that Rivian does, because Ford is established. Then if you're questionable on EVs, you see Tesla doing it, and you have the trust that Ford's been around forever, so maybe they can go with that. So I think that's going to be the people who are most skeptical, dipping their toes into the EV waters, is going to be through something like Ford. Those are the ones that, of the legacy players, I'd say that's the one. But Tesla, by far and away, #1. It's not even close. And, Rivian's attempting to come on, and I love that. I love to see that. I wish them the best. But right now, absolutely, Tesla is by far and away #1.
Good stuff. Landon Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio.com. Always great insights. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Kev, I've seen